My son and I have a bunch of different Xbox controllers between our Series X and our Series S. And over the years that we've had them, we haven't really had much experience with any third-party controllers. So what we actually did recently was we picked up the PDP Rematch Glitch Green controller for his Xbox, and we're trying out some of the features on it, which are supposed to be kind of more designed for pro-level gaming, with some of the back paddles, for example. And we're going to go over the things we really like in this video, and some of the things that we dislike with that controller. So we'll take a look at that just after this. So the way I understand it, the PDP Rematch is kind of targeted as a cheaper alternative to some of the other Pro Series gaming controllers that are out there, like the Turtle Beach Recon or the, of course, Xbox Series Elite controller. Now, one of the cool things about this controller is you can get this in a lot of really unique, exotic types of colors. And there's a bunch of different selections if you even look at their website. The unit out of the box, you get two back paddles, programmable back paddles on the back side. And of course, I want to mention one of the advantages to this controller for a lot of people is that compared to a lot of the other pro-level gaming controllers out there, this is relatively cheap. We bought it for, I believe it was about $45 at Walmart. Around Christmas time, I think it sometimes goes even cheaper. And of course, I also want to mention that due to the cheap price point, it is a wired controller. Now, one thing I do want to mention is I really do like the finish and the look of this controller. It doesn't really take many risks in terms of the shape. It looks almost identical to the Xbox Series standard controller, with the exception of the fact that this controller has some really cool, unique coloring on it. One concern I did have, so I do own a PDP controller for my Switch, and I'm not a huge fan of the way the joysticks feel on that, and I was concerned that this might be the same. And I'm happy to report that the joysticks on this actually feel really good, and they actually, in my opinion, feel better than the stock Xbox controller joysticks, and the fact that they're not too loose, they're not too tight, they feel just right and kind of the area I'd want them. I also like that this controller comes with its own unique app made by PDP, so you can do your button mapping on the controller. And overall, the app itself is relatively easy to use. I found for the most part being able to swap out the back paddle buttons and assignments for that was really, really easy, as well as anywhere else on the controller. And with that being said, I do like the feel of the paddles themselves. I'm actually a little privy to these versus my Elite controller. I find that I like the way that they click in. I think it's the size as well that I like the feel of. And the last thing I want to point out that makes this controller unique compared to a standard Xbox controller is that you have a on-the-fly sound setting built into your D-pad. So basically you hold down the mute button on this controller and you're able to change the volume up and down on your Xbox if you're connecting a headset to this, for example, which I thought was a great addition if you're using a wired headset, because that's kind of one of the downsides I found of using any of the wired headsets on these controllers, or any controller in general. Now, what I'm going to get to is the things that I dislike. So first off, again, I know this is a cheap controller, but personally I'm not a fan of the fact that it's wired. I rarely will ever use a wired controller, with the exception of a couple that I have on my Switch. I find it inconvenient. I don't like having the wire all over the place. Something that it would have even been cool if they made, a version of this that was a little more expensive that was wireless. But as this stands, I don't really care for it to be wired. I also, because it's wired, it also makes the controller feel very light. I'm used to the weighting of the standard series controllers and the standard Elite controllers. I like the weight to them when I'm playing. This one feels a little light. The other thing as well is that the rumble itself feels like no matter what settings I play with on the PDP app, I can't get it to feel like it's heavy or like it feels like it's actually like doing a whole lot. It feels very light even at the highest setting on the rumble. And that leads me to my next point. While the app is simple to use and relatively good, for some reason I kept getting multiple times where it said there was a problem, or it said that there was a problem with the controller, which I knew wasn't the case. It's clearly an issue with the app itself. It's not a major detracting point, but it is something worth noting. And lastly, this to me is not a point that really affects me because I myself on my Elite controller only use 2 paddles, but I know for some people who are diehards of the Elite style pro gaming controllers, the fact that this only has 2 paddles may be a detracting point for them. So overall, I think if you are in the market for a controller where you want to have some of those pro level features like the back paddles and you still want a quality controller where the joysticks work well, this is a great alternative to some of the other controllers out there. It's also a pretty cheap alternative, especially in comparison to the Series Elite controller that costs almost 5 times or something the price that this does. Now, I mostly bought this for my son to play on his Xbox, and as it stands, he genuinely enjoys it, and he likes the fact that he can map certain buttons on the back for games like Fortnite. But overall, I think for the price point, if you're in the market for a pro style controller without going to that upper echelon and in both terms of function and price, this is a pretty reasonable device overall. What do you like about your controller?
That it shoots super fast.
It shoots super fast?
Yeah.
What do you like about the controller itself other than that?
Back buttons.
Oh, those are pretty cool.